Captain Midnight.
In the fall of 2025, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson sat on stage during the Venice Film Festival and emotionally spoke about how he felt he had become pigeonholed into a certain kind of role, unable to really express the true extent of his talent. He had already shot the Moana remake at this point, and I can't help but wonder, assuming that he's even being honest here, if this was the experience that made him take a step back and reevaluate his career. Because, man, Moana 2026 is a movie that makes Skyscraper, Hercules, and his movies with Kevin Hart look like an endless fountain of groundbreaking creativity in comparison. At first, I struggled deciding if I even wanted to cover the new Moana, because there's truly nothing about this movie that I haven't talked about a bunch in other Disney remake videos, films I've been covering since 2019's Aladdin. But Disney's infinite money glitch may have come to an end with Moana, with it and Snow White showing that this formula just doesn't seem to be working anymore. Except then, there's Lilo and Stitch, which paints a very different picture. All of this seems worth talking about. Why the remakes took off in the first place, what's changed, and why this trend may be doomed outside of a very specific kind of movie that Lilo and Stitch represents. If that sounds up your alley, I hope you stick around. And if you find yourself watching my videos and haven't subscribed yet, now could be the time.
Moana's island adventure playset might look relaxing, but there's no time to rest, so slide into action.
I'll start this by saying that I don't think Moana is that much worse than your average Disney live-action remake, which is, not exactly high praise. It hits the expected beats, includes the expected lines and songs, and adds in a few more where they could squeeze them. It's all very par for the course stuff. The image that I, and I'm guessing most of you, saw the most leading up to its release was The Rock in his very cheap-looking Maui wig. And I'm sure it wasn't cheap. I'm sure it somehow cost 20 grand or something, but that kind of goes for this entire movie. I know that this film is incredibly expensive. I know that it somehow cost the GDP of a small country. And yet, when you're actually sitting there watching it, that's just so hard to believe. Aside from maybe the big third act climax, Moana feels incredibly cheap. The comparison to the original movie is absolutely brutal here. I decided to throw that on a few hours before I went to the theater, and yeah, that was tough. Moana is too recent to be a childhood favorite of mine, but going back to it, man, that is an elegantly constructed movie. Its characters are expressive, its environments are beautifully rendered, the songs are catchy, and the script just flows so well and makes it look so easy. The remake is only about 10 minutes longer than the original. I think actually shorter than that, 8, but man, the pacing really drags in comparison. And Johnson's performance, which works so well in the 2016 version, is bizarrely bad here. He feels miscast in a role that he originated. And it's not just the wig, everything feels a little stiff and awkward, with him clearly feeling too old for this role. It's also bizarre to hear Jermaine Clement do his exact same song, but just worse this time, in what's maybe the movie's most poorly directed scene, where none of the action and the gags quite flow as well as they should. And to be fair to this movie, it's hard not to see the faults when you have a well-executed version sitting right there. But honestly, there's just not that much to say about Moana 2026 in general. It's exactly what you think it is. Zooming out to the larger questions, I think is more interesting. Starting with, why did this remake era work so well at first? On paper, it felt like kind of a brilliant scam. You take stories the audience already loves, you don't need to build new characters from scratch, and you completely do away with the hardest part of filmmaking at this scale, which is finding out if your story will resonate with a mass audience. You already know that it does. You wrap it up in the marketing language of celebrating a classic and bringing the story to a new generation, and then you just do that over and over and over again. You make sure it has some current famous people in it, and if you're really ambitious, a few more songs that justify its existence. And this formula was working for a decent stretch there. Cinderella did well, Jungle Book did great, but it was with Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, and Aladdin where I think this turned into a phenomenon and where that formula got set in stone. By then, it really felt like there was this rule of playing it as safe as possible if you wanted those big returns. And look, hate them all you want, I definitely did, but something was working. Parents who'd grown up with the movies on VHS were bringing their kids were seeing these stories for the first time, and Disney was collecting big returns from what was essentially as safe a bet as you could possibly make in a creative industry. There was plenty of people complaining about it, but the numbers rolled in and it felt like Disney's core audience was more than happy to revisit these things in this new, shiny, uncanny valley. The early 2020s saw more of them kick straight to Disney+, something they were already experimenting with thanks to the barely existent Lady and the Tramp in 2019. And I think like most franchises that they make Disney Plus originals for, this kind of devalued the remakes in the audience's eyes. But honestly, considering how bad Mulan and Pinocchio were, it still may have been a blessing in disguise, as they mostly passed by unnoticed. It was with Cruella and The Little Mermaid where the cracks started to show. Cruella performed modestly. It did fine, but was a little bit of a disappointment. That was easy to write off as the result of them taking a risk on an origin story instead of just a straight up remake. The Little Mermaid numbers also came in pretty soft, and they never really reached that Lion King peak again. Still, I think they'd love to have Little Mermaid's numbers now. Plus, industry commentary said that the box office was still recovering from 2020. So are there still signs of life for these remakes? Well, Lilo was a huge hit, I think way bigger than Disney expected. Snow White, on the other hand, was a massive flop, and one that I think they could explain away. The story was just too old, it got too sucked into online controversy, and was just a one-off misfire. Moana is not like that. Sure, there will be excuses. This time the movie was too recent, and a sequel coming out a couple years ago probably hurt audience appetite. But Moana has the kind of massive built-in audience awareness that Disney craves. It's a recent film, one a ton of kids and parents genuinely love, that's still doing huge numbers on streaming. They even made sure to get The Rock back for this one. Again, just like the formula itself, on paper, this is about as safe as you can possibly get. But when the time came, most families looked at this thing and essentially said, yeah, we're good. We have a version of this we watch all the time. As the novelty of these remakes has worn off, I think this will happen more and more. But then there's Lilo and Stitch, the hit that I keep mentioning that goes against the recent trends here. Nothing about it I think is really that different from the rest of these remakes. Like basically all of them except probably Pete's Dragon, I take the original over it every time. But its success gives us a lot more insight into which remakes I think will still work, and I think it gives them a much more narrow range of options than their old strategy of just making one of these for every big title in the old Disney vault. That doesn't seem to be a surefire thing anymore. But Lilo and Stitch, a movie from 2002 that wasn't milked to death with sequels, and whose audience are now around the age where many of them have kids themselves that they'll want to take to the new one, that is a much better bet. Now, I think they know this too, and they're betting that Tangled, their next big remake, will hit that same sweet spot. Basically, not too recent and not too old. That gives them options, but definitely not as many as they used to have. I know they recently canceled the Aristocats remake, which was in development hell for a long time, and I would bet that this is why. They've been getting a much clearer picture of what has a chance to hit and what doesn't. And weirdly, I think this all sets up DreamWorks much better than Disney to be the king of these kind of animated remakes. They have a stable of hits that work in that late 90s to early 2010s time frame and have proved that they can make this work, for better or worse, with the How to Train Your Dragon remake. Disney is in a tougher spot comparatively, unless they're willing to remake, like, actual Pixar movies. Now, I'm sure they'll try, where they can, to milk what they can, and hey, if they can turn Lilo and Stitch 2 into a big thing, this all might work out for them. But the biggest days for the remakes themselves, I think those will stay in 2019. Disney is an extremely risk-averse company, and creating a slate that's mostly new movies, not remakes or sequels, is about the riskiest thing that a studio can do. But there comes a point where going back to the well over and over again can backfire just as much. For every Toy Story 5 success story, there's a potential Moana or Captain America 4 disaster waiting in the wings. When the expensive, supposedly surefire tentpole hits can't hold up the tent anymore, things have to change eventually. The Moana remake shows us a Disney that's stuck in the past, with a slate of movies that feels made with a certainty that they can bring back 2019. And I think it's become clear, through a failed Star Wars movie and now a failed remake, that that's just not happening. Now, it's tough for any big creative force to weather how much movies and TV have changed in the past few decades, but some are able to navigate it better than others. That's why my latest episode of Showrunners is on Grey's Anatomy and Bridgerton producer Shonda Rhimes. A major force in TV, she went from writing a panned Britney Spears movie to being the biggest production powerhouse in television. I think it's a fascinating story and one worth exploring. There's also an episode on Rod Serling, the creator of The Twilight Zone, and Vince Gilligan, creator of Breaking Bad, with every installment of Showrunners diving into the people behind some of the most influential series in TV history. If you haven't seen it yet, now's the perfect time to start. You can watch Showrunners right now exclusively on Nebula, where it lives alongside exclusive videos from creators like Lindsay Ellis, Nando V Movies, and other shows like CinemaStix's Let's Rewind. There's over 200 creators on Nebula now, and it's only growing. You'll also get all my regular videos on there ad-free. You can get 50% off an annual membership, just $30 for the whole year or $250 a month. Head to go.nebula.tv/captainmidnight, use the QR code on screen, or click the link below to watch the Shonda Rhimes episode right now.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.